Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience as we worked to get our virtual audience on the same page as everyone here today. But we're ready to get started. And so, like I said, thank you for your patience. We're so glad that you are here today for the second annual Belief and Belonging Festival. My name is Andre Baeza. I will be your MC/host for today. And just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. Just so you know, we do have vendors on your left here with us today, including tables with information from our speakers who will be with us this afternoon after the show, so please stick around. We want you to have a wonderful experience this afternoon. And one of the ways we will provide this experience is by keeping an intimate setting here today. We ask that, if at all possible, you do not exit during a performance. We will open the doors between performances, though, to give you guys time to exit if needed. We also have 2 sets of bathrooms, this direction, and then for the ADA and gender-neutral bathrooms, we do have it behind me on your left. Knowing the building is a big square, just to keep walking, and you'll go back to where you started. And now, before I introduce Cheryl, I'd like to say hello to our virtual audience, but now I'd love to introduce one of our co-founders and the producer of this event, Cheryl West-Leong.
Hello. Thanks for being patient again. It is so good to be in this space in our second annual Belief and Belonging Festival, something that my partner and I, Dr. Kristen Donnelly, who unfortunately could not be with us here today, but hello, partner. We are just thrilled to be able to create a space where we could talk about 2 things that mean a lot to us, but we realized weren't being talked about in a lot of places. And that is the things that we believe, not just religion, but the things that we find that we believe, and the things that we believe, how they make us belong or not belong in places. So for instance, whether it's a political affiliation, whether it's what I believe about myself, whether it's what I believe about other people, whether it's what I believe about a place, and the things that I am trying to believe now, what I used to believe, or what I am holding on to with all my might, how that impacts where I belong, once belonged, or am trying to belong. And so last year you heard all kinds of amazing stories in the intersections of those places. And this year we wanted to go to a little bit different direction, still within that same thing, but we wondered, what would it be like to look at what happens when we acknowledge the institutions that surround us and how they impact our understanding of belief and belonging. Because institutions are like the water that we swim in. If you know David Wallace Foster, you talk about there's 2 fish and another fish says, how's the water? And the little fish says, what water? Institutions are those things that are so ubiquitous in our society that we don't really realize that we're a part of them, and yet we cannot orient our lives without them. They're the things that shape us. And so many of you, when you think about institutions, you may be thinking about church or thinking about school systems. You may be thinking about government. But the way that we frame it today are things like institution of the family, institution of marriage, yes, nation state, yes, church. We are in Texas. We will look at the institution of football. What does it mean to want to leave or think you've left the institution, but that institution has formed you? How does it affect what you continue to believe? How does it affect where you belong? So these incredible speakers have been working through their reflections on these things, and they bring you brave, bold, and beautiful stories today. Last year, for those who were here, you may remember Mariah Humphreys began our time together with a land acknowledgement. It's an important thing to do when we gather in a space, when we acknowledge that the land that we are on is not our own. And so as I began to think about taking a moment to acknowledge this land, it was difficult to not make a quick parallel to the idea of what it means to be on borrowed land and to wish the land was yours, to fight over land, and knowing that this young country, though it's been a part of so many land grab experiences, still has a lot to learn about what it means to be able to speak into places in our world that are in dire and desperate fights for pieces of land. They're about much more than that. And we call for peace. What does that really mean? And it was something that I didn't know how to talk about acknowledging our plight here as people on another land without talking about what's happening in the Middle East. In part, knowing that I wasn't the right person to speak to that. Because as we gather, we ask our speakers to tell their stories vulnerably. And it wasn't my right to speak to this moment when one of our speakers grew up in the West Bank. And so as we talked, I knew that the words that I had were insufficient. And so this week, he so generously said that he would like to share a piece of his story through song as part of his storytelling for us today. And so to hold space for all that is happening, I would like to bring my friend Timothy Palmer to the stage. And we'll begin with our first story, unplanned until this week. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Cheryl. I'm honored to be here. This is a story in song called Passersby. Well, Bethlehem in Palestine, the village of our Lord. My right hand tugs my mother's arm, my left one wields a sword. A weapon forged, a branch entwined, a vision of a strength sublime. The soldier's finger shifts a might, my mother pulls me close. Well, the Gaza Strip in 81, she holds my father's thumb. My sister's cries dance with the dust that rusts the setting sun, while outside the window by the sea the mortars fall, the children flee. Young fathers find it hard to breathe and pull their daughters close. Well, Christmas time at 5 years old, we're gathered round the tree. I count the fingers on my hand for people, then there's me. While baby brother sighs a yawn across the island, a line is drawn. We scar the land we live upon when we turns into me. Well, a war breaks out across the sea, that weary shroud of doom. My parents gather us around, we need to make some room. A stranger full of grace and peace, so this is who we call a refugee. A human being like you and me, will we mend each other's wounds? In the rear view of my minivan, I catch my children's eyes. They're asking a question I once never realized. How come that man who holds the sign and waves, well, nobody wants to look his way? And all that I could think to say is it doesn't have to be this way. You can see and help and show the way by not just passing by. No, we're not just passers-by.
Thank you, Tim, for that touching and heartfelt song. I just wanted to give a quick introduction of me. My name is Andre Baeza. As I mentioned earlier, I am the Senior Coordinator of Intercultural Engagement in the Division of Student Life at Baylor University. But I'm originally from the LA, Los Angeles area in California, Filipino American, and I've been fortunate to live in various different places. And one thing that I have sought in each place that I've lived is a sense of belonging. And so I love the theme, what this festival stands for. And thank you, Cheryl, for inviting me to MC. But now I'd love to introduce our next speaker and artist. His name is Austin Lemons, a music teacher from here in Waco, Texas. His creative work focuses on incorporating white noise, field recordings, audio samples, tones, found instruments, as well as traditional percussion instruments into cohesive structures. Austin is also passionate about performing on steel drums, as well as teaching the music and history of this incredible instrument from Trinidad and Tobago. As a band director and percussion coordinator, Austin serves the students at Waco High by leading rehearsals in percussion ensemble, concert band percussion, steel band, and jazz band. He lives in Waco with his wife, Nikki, his daughter, Madeline, and their two cats, Calypso and Tulise.
Awesome. So my name is Austin, and this is my steel drum. This is, as said in the introduction, the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago. I care a whole lot about playing and teaching about this instrument because I got to play it for 8 years, 4 years in high school and 4 years in college. The instrument, I could go on for ages about the history of the instrument. Just ask any of my students from Waco High. But I will try to give you the TLDR today, since the music that I'm going to play is a lot more interesting than anything that I have to say. The population of the island of Trinidad and Tobago were mostly descended from kidnapped West African people who were enslaved. But the culture of the West African people survived through the slave trade. So the English colonizers were getting intimidated by that culture. They were scared that the culture was going to overpower them and that they were going to be booted off the island, which, spoiler alert, they eventually were. But they said, you know what, you can keep your culture, you can keep your music, but you're not allowed to drum on skin drum heads. That's against the law now. And the Trinidadians just said, okay, that's fine. We'll just drum on long sticks of bamboo. Bamboo is everywhere. We'll just do that and call it tambu bamboo. And then decades later, the colonizers said, okay, well, this is causing gang violence. The tambu bamboo is, so we're going to make that illegal too. Then one of the members of one of these tambu bamboo crews was in his mother's kitchen when a cookie tin fell on the ground and it dented, and he was just like hitting stuff and he hit the dent and was like, oh, that sounds kind of nice. What if I make another dent? Ooh, that sounds pretty cool too. I can just dent all over this cookie tin. So cookie tins were not just all over the island as much as oil drums were. So he and several of his friends collected a bunch of oil drums and created this instrument out of it using literal garbage generated by colonialism. So that is the very short and slightly bastardized version of the history of the instrument. But that's what amazes me about it. And I try to remember and honor the anti-colonial roots of the instrument every time I teach and perform on it, which I'm about to do. So, and my first thing that I'm going to play, I'm going to do a little bit of an improv jam, and it's going to require everybody's two favorite words: audience participation. So I am going to give y'all a beat, and y'all are going to give the beat back to me. And then I'm going to hum a little bass line that y'all are going to hum for me. So you get to basically be my backup band today. I'm going to improvise for a little while, either until I feel like I should be done or until someone comes up and says it's time for you to be done. And then as soon as I'm done, I'll probably hold up the stop fist. And then that means that that'll be the last stomp. And then maybe we'll all end together. Maybe we won't. Whatever needs to happen will happen. So I'm going to try to go ahead and get y'all started. See if you can stomp this beat with me. Lovely. Excellent. And while we stomp, we're going to see if we can hum this bass line. Bum, 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 bum.
Thank you, Austin, for that interactive piece. Now we have Alexandra Ramchuk coming up. She is a Los Angeles-based, award-winning screenwriter, producer, actress, and TV host. She was born and raised in Podvern, Ukraine. Alexandra moved to the US in 2014 to pursue her dream of becoming a famous Hollywood actress and TV host. Currently, Alexandra is hosting a TV series, The Immigrant Success Stories, where she interviews successful immigrants from different countries who have different professions in order to support and inspire new immigrants to succeed on their journey into the unknown.
I always knew that my life would be extraordinary. Even growing up in a small village in Ukraine, I just knew. One day, my older brother went to the United States to be a student. He sent me letters that made me want of going there too. But it was just a dream of my life, as there were no signs that my dream would come true. I was a freshman in the university preparing to be a teacher of French language. France seemed more realistic, so I could only dream about going to the United States. And when my brother called me 5 years later and said, "Congratulations, you won a green card," I felt joy and sadness at the same time. I had made completely different plans for my future, and immigrating to the new country was just a dream, but seemed very unrealistic. My future husband and I had been dating for 7 years. Our wedding was already planned, but the green card was not for both of us. It was just for me. I wanted to have a family, but at the same time, I dreamed of being in the film industry, and I knew this would be my only chance to come to America. I decided to challenge myself and have both. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was my only decision. It was then when I realized that life gives us chances, not at the moment we want them, but when we are ready for them. And no matter what kind of challenges I had in my life before, nothing compares to immigrating to the new country. Moving to the United States was a big change that caused a lot of thoughts and feelings. At first, it was hard for me to dive into local life because my husband was still in Ukraine and I was torn between two countries, flying back and forth every 3 to 5 months. This made it difficult for me to fully immerse myself into local life. I didn't go to school here. I didn't have a job that required me to speak English language, so I couldn't become a member of local society. I was talking only to people from my own country due to poor language skills. I lived according to the old traditions, and I was often communicating to the people and to my friends from Ukraine over the phone. But soon, I was not able to connect with what was happening back in Ukraine because the society was moving on and I couldn't live my life there either. And trying to live in two places at once didn't help me to achieve my dream of feeling at home in the United States. This was the most difficult time in my life. I felt lost, like many immigrants who are currently in this phase. They feel as if they have lost themselves, who they were in the past before they were forced out of their country. They found themselves in the conditions they didn't choose and the places they didn't plan to live, like Ukrainians right now. Except it was my decision, and I was the only one who could change it and make the right choice. And in order to do it, I needed to know what other people did to make America their home. During the next 5 years, I met a lot of immigrants, and their stories helped me to understand what people experience in immigration, why they still don't feel like they belong here after living in the United States for more than 10, 20, or 40 years, and what stopped them from feeling at home here in America, even if it was their biggest dream before. After hearing their stories, I have learned that when there are big changes in life, the question of identity and past experience often take on special importance. Our identity develops throughout our life. And all the experience with which we came to the United States have shaped this identity until now. And everything that we will encounter here will also impact our identity. We will meet new people, we will learn new language and acquire new habits. Identity is personal. Our identity belongs only to us. But at the same time, it makes us feel connected to the other people. Let's say, if you're Americans, Mexicans, or Ukrainians like me, right? We feel the kinship to the people from these countries. We speak the same language, share the same habits and holidays, and also that's why in Ukraine we have the same religion, we have the same faith, right? We celebrate the same holidays. And that's why even if people didn't go to the church in their native country or state, they go there here because that's the place they feel at home. And we don't realize how much we miss home until we move. And it doesn't matter if you make this move between countries, states, or continents. That's how I lived for 8 years. Finally, my husband got visa. We moved to Minnesota, bought a house there. And the word house was always associated with the word home for us. In Ukraine, when people buy a house, they live for a long time in this house, or the whole generations lived in that house. That's why it was very important for us to have our own home. It meant that we belong to that place. But what we didn't know, that people here in the United States move often because of their work. So our neighbors kept changing, and after living there for couple more years, we realized that it didn't feel like home for us. We wanted to have a community, like-minded people around us. So we decided to move to Los Angeles, since that's a place for actors and filmmakers like us. All of us, we want to belong to the society, to the group of people where we feel our own. And when we are moving to another state or to another city, we always expect that the new place of residence will become our home. But it doesn't always happen like that. Some people assimilate and some do not. It all depends on our ability to integrate into another place. For example, when I first moved to the United States, I didn't know what baby shower was. Because in my country, they said, you shouldn't buy things for an unborn child in advance. It's a bad luck. But I had a baby shower for my daughter here because I wanted to belong. And I was interested in observing how all our myths are destroyed when you get to know another culture. We begin to realize that not everything in this world, as we were taught in our childhood. And the more you travel, the easier other worldviews are to accept. And if the immigrants could adequately accept the positive and negative sides of the new country, and at the same time to preserve the old traditions of the old country without conflict, that's the way for them to feel comfortable and become successful. There are people for whom it's difficult and exhausting, and both reactions are normal. It's really hard for us to understand what we really want when we live in one place, surrounded by the people who have their own expectations of us. And just because while we are trying to please everyone else and catch up with all the demands from the society we live in, we forget to listen to ourselves. And when we don't know who we are, we're trying to move to another city, to another state, to another country, just to feel liberated. But it's not going to happen until we find ourselves. If we don't know who we truly are and what we really want, it would be hard for us to find the place we belong to. We will always feel like we don't belong to our native country anymore, but we won't feel home here either. Remember, that's us who write our own history, and we decide how it will end. If it seems to you that you ended up on this island with absolutely nothing, I have good news for you. You have you left. And you're not only how you feel in this moment. You're your knowledge, your skills, your experience, and your memories, and everything that you acquired while sailing your ocean of life. Just bring it to the surface. Make it visible to yourself. Get to know yourself, and you will find the place you belong to. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra, for boldly sharing your dream and that story. Next, we have Frederick Gerard Brock, who is one of the lead pastors and co-founders of the Message Church in San Antonio, Texas. And he's also the all-school chaplain at St. Mary's Hall, a college preparatory school in San Antonio. He also serves as an adjunct faculty member at Denver Seminary, teaching homiletics. He's committed to service, as he's a chaplain, lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force Reserve, serving as the IMA to the deputy commandant and senior instructor at the Air Force Chaplain Corps College, Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. Frederick holds earned degrees from Texas Southern University, Baylor University, and the Oblate School of Theology. A standout athlete, he spent a brief stint as an outside linebacker for the NFL's Houston Texans. Frederick is married to Dr. Candace L. Brock, and together they have two daughters, Zoe and Chloe. And I wanted to give a content warning, as there is brief mention of suicidal ideation in Frederick's talk. So if there's space for you there is space for you to leave, to take care of yourself. And so I just wanted to give you that warning ahead of him talking. Thank you.
German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer coined the term cheap grace. Cheap grace is this idea that you can receive a gift from God without there being something required out of you. By contrast, costly grace requires something out of the recipient. In my experience, everything comes with a cost. I was introduced to my faith at the Providence Missionary Baptist Church on the west side of San Antonio, Texas. It was at that 10-member church that I learned about a God who created the earth and the fullness thereof. It was also in that small, traditionally Black Baptist church that I also gave my life to Jesus Christ at an early age, and I acknowledged my call to ministry at the age of 14. I was also fairly young when I learned about this awesome game called football. When I was 5 years old and my brother Virgil, who I affectionately call Bubba, was 7, my pawpaw bought us a full football set. It was a set of pads, shoulder pads, helmet, pants, jersey. My brother was the Dallas Cowboys and I was the Chicago Bears. And while the package clearly said do not use for actual tackle football, my brother and I spent hours after that Christmas day running at one another, trying to see who could tackle who, like jousting adolescents. From the time that I felt my very first hit, and I gave my very first hit, because I gave a few to be sure, I fell in love with the game of football. When I was born, my mother and different adults, aunts, uncles, and cousins told me that I had something unusually mature about me. If you let my mother tell it, she'll tell you that I was never a baby. I was just a little Fred. And to be sure, I feel the same way. Of course, I've learned some things along the way, but I feel like I came to this earth knowing some things as well. From a very early age, I had a number of high expectations on me. These high expectations continued at the same time that I acknowledged my call to ministry at 14. I also began to dunk a basketball at the age of 14. In 8th grade, I was dunking the ball with one hand. By the time I made it to 9th grade, I was dunking on people with two hands. There were a number of people who would come to the games. In fact, we had just as many people at our freshman basketball games as there were at the varsity basketball games. As I was becoming a great basketball player, I was also becoming a great football player. And if you know anything about this institution called Texas high school football, that was a really big deal. Playing high school football, I was a star, and I would occasionally have my ego stroked as well. And what teenager at that age doesn't like their ego stroked? This, of course, seemed to not mesh well with this Bible boy persona that I had as a 14-year-old, but nonetheless, I enjoyed playing football. In 2006, I signed a rookie free agent contract with the NFL's Houston Texans. And when I signed that contract, I thought to myself, it's finally an opportunity for me to be like Jonah and run away from my call. Nobody will call me Reverend Brock. Nobody knows that I'm known as Bible boy around my friends. And no one was going to argue against me signing $1 million contract, and I would also have an excuse to be busy on Sundays. My experience was short-lived. Just 2.5 months into my contract, I received a call that changed my life. I received a call that I was being cut from the team. And as I sat there outside of a youth football camp that I was working, in fact, it was a camp that I had grown up going to. I was working the camp in the off season, and as I sat there in my brand new truck that I had bought with my signing bonus money, tears began to fall down my eyes. And I called Bubba, my jousting partner from when we were 5 and 7 years old. I called him and I said, Bubba, I've been cut from the team. What do? I'm no longer a professional athlete. I can't go out here and help these kids. And my brother said to me, Fred, you may no longer be a Houston Texan, but you're still a professional athlete. And so I took some time to gather myself and figure out what I was going to do in the coming months. I considered joining the Air Force, but in the end, I decided to go to seminary. When I went to seminary, I didn't quite feel like I belonged there either. This feeling of not belonging it was a feeling that I was familiar with. After all, I am Black, and while I know that I belong in a divine sense, I often am in spaces where some people make me feel like I don't belong in an existential sense. Nonetheless, I also felt like I did not belong because I was in the best shape of my life, wondering if I should still be pursuing professional football. I'm also a first-generation college graduate, and there I was in grad school feeling the pressure of having to be successful for my entire family. But I was there, and in my experience, I've learned that just being there can be enough. During my second year of seminary, I joined what's called the Air Force Chaplain Candidate Program. And in the high-stakes, often zero-fail world of military officership, I felt like I had finally found a home. In fact, to date, I've received 3 meritorious service awards for the things that I've been blessed to do as a military officer. But I did share with you that everything comes with a cost. In 2020, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder due to continual trauma that I experienced as a military chaplain. I was prompted, encouraged by my wife, Candace, who was a licensed master social worker, to go see a military mental health professional for severe suicidal ideations that I experienced for the first time in my life. As I made that long walk to the therapist's office, I sat down in a chair full of pride and shame. And as I sat there, the therapist looked over my military files, and as I explained to him my personal accomplishments, he asked me one question. He said, Dr. Brock, did you think that all of these accomplishments would come without a cost? As I sat back there, I leaned back in my seat and tears began to fall down my eyes. He then asked me, Dr. Brock, what are you passionate about? What do you want to do? And for the first time in my life, since I felt the pressure of other people's expectations when I was 14, I began to think about, for the first time, what I actually wanted, what Fred wanted to do with his life. And so at my wife's prompting, I rented out a studio in downtown San Antonio to continue to pursue my passion for photography. In my lifetime, I've realized that institutions have been both places of comfort and constraint. I've never had a problem achieving and meeting the expectations of the institutions that I have been a part of, but I have had an issue feeling like I belong as it relates to being within those institutions. I'm learning that whether I meet the expectations of institutions or whether I meet my personal expectations, it really doesn't matter. I'm here, and that's enough. Thank you.
Next up, we have poet, speaker, and coach Cheryl T. Cooley. She believes in branding and narrative as a spiritual practice. She has worked as a poet, journalist, Marcom manager, enterprise storyteller, content experience designer, and narrative strategist for government, corporations, and nonprofits. She and her work have been featured at the Lincoln Center for Performing Arts, Museum of Modern Art, in Essence and Poetry magazines, and on The Oprah Show. As president of the Poetry Society of Virginia, she lives, works, and loves from Northern Virginia, USA. Please help me welcome Cheryl.
Nina Simone learned to play the piano at age 3 and later became a classical pianist. The assassination of Medgar Evers and the deaths of 4 schoolgirls in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 invoked her to begin to use music as a form of protest. The house where she lived and learned still stands as a form of protest as well. In 2018, this house was designated a national treasure, just as Nina Simone was an international treasure. It is a site of memory, a still small voice in North Carolina, which incidentally is where I was also born. It symbolizes our nation's identity, and it reminds us that this voice of this house belongs in Nina Simone's story. It's a call to action to live powerfully. Nina Simone's 3-room childhood clapboard house. Enduring A-frame house, ashen overlap, splinter after splinter, algae-crusted steps, a bare porch, rocker, the dingy front door, a cuboidal mouth opening to frameless rooms and frangible floors, hand-stitched pastel quilt squares draping over a rusting iron bed. Just past the blue shiplap room, dark, cold, wood-burning stove, a silenced kettle, sheer pushpin curtains, curled windowsill paint, still shiny Jesus, the cross, the wall-mounted phone, its hand crank, near a starless window, the piano, the standing sheet of bold font Bach, timeless, engraved, curvy piano organ, defiant and relentlessly Black. What I know of loving powerfully begins with loving myself. And a time when I had to consciously do this in a relationship was when I realized I was in a voodoo chicken situation. It's that time when you're not really just friends, but you're not quite romantic. You don't want to lose your person, but you're not willing to totally commit. Each one of you is standing by waiting for the other one to jump in and stop stalling. The game you play in that interim, in the in-between time, it's voodoo chicken. And it only ends when you start to listen to the still small voice inside of you. Choose yourself every time and love powerfully. So this poem is called Voodoo Chicken. Gots me hanker, gots me squall, peeping tall Tom at your lovely in your throat. And the itch, hellcat itch of it, rides me like a witch into the night. Those lonesome nights, no calm will come. You're just a mule-teeth puppet show. Stop and go, chicken-hearted to the core. You say, don't cross the line, don't crack the door. How sweet meat, milk, how navy black, how crow. But love has stayed and love is made, is all, is with, for. We almost did, just about, know how, wouldn't, fall. This moot jinx so far in, it's inside out. We say we won't, but reckon do. Yak, yak, yak. Stall for if, wait for good. Gut in, ass out. I grew up in a house with parents who did not have the economic means to always give us entertainment or have us involved in extracurricular activities. But somehow my parents always seemed to save the money for us to ride to Richmond, Virginia to see Barnum and Bailey Ringling Brothers Circus. And it was something that my brother and I so looked forward to all year. We were waiting to go to the circus. This poem is about that experience. I was so taken with all the moving parts of the circus, and they also mirrored all the moving parts of my family. Here's what I imagine the narratives of onlookers to be when they saw us. Poor things, this must be the only spot of happiness they ever have. But having learned to live in a house with my mother and living the narratives that we wanted, here was ours. You're watching, so we will entertain you. And all along, we were having the time of our lives. That still small voice kept us surviving the pressures of being who we were in communities that didn't really know what to do with us. So this poem is called Trapeze, the greatest show on earth. 1, a day of circus. My brother and I shimmy and jive in back seats under the cream leather roof of our bay brown family Thunderbird. For $5 hard-earned dollars, we will get life-size posters of midget twins in tuxedos, drum rolls, and a ringmaster. Lions and cheetahs crawl from immense steel playpens, and I don't blink. We, a Black family from a shabby house, have rubbed 2 nickels together for change. Even the flying Walendas can't hang and connect from our trapezes. 2, we are a 3-ring family flying our car bird to Richmond. We want circus. Daddy peels a $5 bill from the wad of ones so we can see clowns. Painted men who look like bright nosegays, pinks, reds, oranges, white, and jumping yellows. Daddy's face is many browns and frowns. I look at him looking at clowns, sucking popcorn husk from his teeth. Same enamel suck noise of the tongue as it slides over bicuspids, making mouth wind after meat. In an end ring, 22 clowns have begun to stow themselves in a chartreuse Volkswagen Bug. I remember that we have come to this tent riding the hum of nut brown metallic roar and dreams. Beneath an alabaster cowhide roof, amid knocking pistons, we are flowers, larkspurs, blooming in daddy's yucca blades. 3, the hucksters, pedaling peculiar to 5,000 natural curiosities. In frenetic dramas, they've got our little red wagons. General Tom Thumbs, thick mannequin thighs, scoot and ski past rope dancers, tumblers. Gunther the trainer cracks the whip, leads the leopard's tawny and black spots to jump through fire. The one-trick pony simply gallops, nothing more. We are a caravan dressed in glamour and dust. Black people with pocket change. We stagger in wide-eyed applause. 4, we are wire walkers, a Black family from a threadbare house, our own. We have saved months of candy money for Carnival. An enclosed car of traveling talents. We entertain spectators, give a series of farcical acts that end in faith. The greatest of these is putting one day and soon in the same sentence. We survive falls, plunge thousands of feet into straw. Nothing is there to catch us. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing your story through both storytelling and poem. Next up, we have Stephanie McAuliffe. She speaks, writes, and teaches on our human condition. She creates bridges to bring awareness to the impact of our internalized trauma, our energetic patterns, and how we heal. She's found incredible transformation in her own journey through healing sexual abuse, multi-generational alcoholism and addiction, and more recently, breast cancer. She teaches via her own lived experience for others to find their own connections and voice. And after a 27 career on Wall Street, Stephanie is the founder of the Way of the Diamond Warrior, and she's the author of 2 international best-selling books. She's also a nature enthusiast and lover of art and live music. Help me welcome Stephanie.
I was conceived in the back of a station wagon in a grapefruit grove during spring break over a 6-pack of beer. My father was abandoned on the streets of Chicago at 3 days old and adopted out through the Protestant church to a middle-class family who lived in the suburbs of Boston. Or is it that his parents were teenagers who gave him up for a better life than they could provide? We tell stories to make ourselves feel better, to add color to our humble beginnings. But what matters more, the story of where you came from or the story you're living now? And how do we balance the two when one greatly affects the other? With family, we hide the truth like skeletons in our closet, yet we share the untruths that somehow make us feel bigger than who we are. When I was a young girl, my grandmother regaled with great pride that we were descendants of Leif Erikson, a Viking of Vikings with tough warrior energy. I imagined the tales of travel, of loss and victory and the winner-takes-all mentality, and the boisterous home life of family coming together after long times apart. My experience was anything but. I grew up with the oft-spoken phrase, children should be seen and not heard. This was first penned by an Old English clergyman in the late 15th century and was originally targeted towards young women. At some point, it was reinterpreted to include all children. It's a phrase I heard in the back of my mind even when it wasn't being spoken. It allowed for little expression of who I was. The underlying messages were, fall in line, act like an adult, and you'll be okay. Mine is one of many generations before me who were raised with this toxic phrase. Maintaining the image of the family was first and foremost. From the outside, we looked prim and proper. As a young girl, I also heard stories of us being descendants of the British royal family, majestic and stoic with long-born pageantry and customs. Our family crest was proudly hung on the wall, painted by my great Aunt Sue. And much like the royal family, there were skeletons hidden in our closet and secrets that went to the grave. We pretended that we didn't know what we knew, that we didn't see what we saw, and those who spoke the truth were othered. We were taught to not be, taught to continue a heritage that was sometimes dangerous to both the psyche and our physical being. It's what I call the trappings of the white middle class. You have food on your plate and clothes on your back. Be happy with what you have. I've sacrificed and struggled for you. You're going to have a say when you're paying your own rent. But the physiological needs that were the focus for our being didn't always provide safety or trust, the keys to our becoming, like a hug or hearing, I love you. We need love, understanding, and patience to be seen for who you are, not being molded into someone's definition of who they want you to be. I naturally sought connection with my family, but there was little depth to our conversations or space for talking about what was really happening under our roof. My family went beyond the premise that it wasn't safe to talk about sex, politics, or religion. We didn't talk about life. We were together, but essentially apart. Instead of feeling accepted, the silence made me feel separate while living under a shared roof. The transgressions were hidden and swept under the rug. It felt like the image of the family was more important, even when one of the individuals was put in harm's way. Yet at least 4 generations of women in my family were sexually abused and not protected. Our pain mired in silence and numbed by alcohol. The combination of my ancestry was confusing. Who are you really when you have the heritage of indestructible pillars in society combined with a feeling of illegitimacy if you don't maintain the status quo? How do you evolve when individuality isn't championed? As children, we have little choice. We follow the rules in order to be accepted. We don't know any different. Then at some point, you see the reality of things. For many years, I numbed my pain through drugs, alcohol, and then a 27-year career on Wall Street. What I hadn't realized is that numbing my pain is a shadow that would continue to follow me until I finally turned around to face it. Our soul pushes us to make a choice. At long last, I found the courage to stop swiping left on my deeply held emotions. Then, as the world entered into the pandemic, the universe looked me square in the eye and asked me to choose. Did I want to continue to be connected via the unspoken family trauma bonds, or did I want to be free? It's not just about walking away, though. Those who raise us are here to teach us valuable lessons for our evolution. At long last, those who raise us are here to teach us valuable lessons for our evolution. For my own well-being, I decided I needed to let go of the deep longing for anyone to show up for me beyond what they were capable of. As beautifully said by Naguib Mahfouz, home is not where you were born. Home is where all your attempts to escape cease. I walked away from the fear of being excommunicated And this began what I call an energetic divorce. Through many layers of acceptance and forgiveness, I let go of the rule that to be accepted is to silence who I am. I finally acknowledged the loss of my childhood, growing up too fast, the innocence, the wonder, the ability to feel safe, to dream. With the space created in my heart, a chosen family emerged. Chosen family accepts me without limitation. They're with me through my evolution. They don't care where I come from. They don't tie me to my old stories, nor do they pigeonhole me into a box. Being with chosen family is like a renaissance of childhood. I can play and be safe with people who support my exploration and me discovering me. With people also committed to the truth of who they are. I spent a long time wondering and wandering, never really feeling grounded or connected. At the core of our existence, we are children of God and the universe, and part of this journey is to find your place. My path has been to trust myself, to continue to help break toxic cycles, and to use my voice for good. Turns out, the story about Leif Erikson was a lie. But I still imagine what his home life was like, boisterous, filled with tales of victory and loss, coming home to care and be taken care of, full of energy and rest, food and nurturing. An outward expression of the love of being together, not unlike chosen family, where we don't question our place or how we fit in. There's a shared joy in community and of being in something bigger than the individual that champions your uniqueness. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing your story, your journey, freedom of chosen family. And next up, we have Lindsay Yaros. She is a native Floridian turned Texan. She attended graduate school at the Garland School of Social Work at Baylor University, and she is a licensed master social worker and currently works as a palliative care social worker at a local hospital. She is currently working towards her clinical licensure, and Lindsay is passionate about end-of-life care, LGBTQ plus affirming spaces, and writing poetry. In another world, she would own a PB&J food truck and live by the sea. You can always find her at her favorite local coffee shop, Pinewood, or spending her days with her sweet German short-haired pointer, Canoe. Help me welcome Lindsay.
My brother and I attended church one Sunday as they were doing a celebration of the church's history. They were getting ready to renovate the sanctuary for the first time since it was built in the 80s. I was feeling emotional as it was also my last Sunday at church before heading off to a ministry school for about 5 months. And also the fact that my family was a huge part of the church's growth throughout this time. Evan, my brother, and I were together worshiping. And to paint a picture, this is a really big church. They had the entire choir out in their robes, the huge pipe organ was playing, and the song How Great Thou Art started playing. And one thing I like about this song is how it talks about God as a divine wonder. I became emotional. I grabbed my brother's hand and I looked over at him and he was crying too. I felt a deep emotional reaction as the wonderful memories I've experienced in this place came flooding back. Despite all the times I felt like I would never be accepted for who I am, I still remembered singing on Sundays with my family, walking with my grandma to the front of the sanctuary when I was ready to commit my life to God, and countless candlelight services, Easter performances. It was beautiful and holy to remember these things. As the music began to swell, Evan and I grabbed each other's hands, and we decided to head down to the front of the sanctuary to keep worshiping. And as we were heading down to the front, The stained glass windows that are on a track above the choir loft began to close, and I just kept weeping. I felt something so divine and holy in that moment. Evan and I remained holding hands. We lifted our arms in what felt like surrender. I felt light, I felt warm, and I felt so connected to something bigger. And I can still feel those exact feelings right now in this moment. I experienced something divine and holy that day. Moments like this give me glimmers of hope that kept me searching for hope in a place that I would never fully belong. It's been about 8 years now since that moment, and now I work in palliative care. And palliative care is an added layer of support for patients and their families who are experiencing serious or life-limiting illnesses. And part of this role, I do psychosocial assessments with patients to understand them better so we can holistically care for them. I had a patient, I was asking about her faith, as that's part of the assessment, and she shared that God is important to her. I asked if she belonged to a church, and she said, yes, I attend the church in my heart. And she went on to share that she doesn't need a building to know God and that the church is filled with evil people. She shared that she experiences God through other people and that she sees God in me simply because I'm being kind to her. And I actually related to this woman's response. She so boldly said that people within the church are evil, and I don't disagree. I've experienced really great things in the church, and I've also experienced really harmful theology as well. I struggled with my sexuality most of my life, especially in the time I was involved in the church I so deeply loved. I wanted so badly to hold on to my fond memories that I couldn't see the other times that the church was doing so much harm. It wasn't until I moved to Waco in 2019 that I began to see the nuances of life or the intersections of systems of oppression. Attending UBC and the School of Social Work, it allowed me a place to explore these ideas that you don't have to fit into a specific box to exist within any space. It was mind-blowing that I could wear shorts to church, that I didn't have to give all my free time to the church, and that they were open to my unbelief. I was never forced to see things differently. And when I was given autonomy over my own thoughts, my whole world opened. And when I think about belonging, I think of just that. Being able to just exist and that be enough. If it wasn't for these two places, both of them either directly linked or affiliated with the same institution that caused me so much harm, I would probably think like my patient on most days rather than just some. What I understand now is the difficulty I had in moving to Waco for grad school. Leaving behind the faith communities I was tied to would open the door for me to reflect on the way I had thought about myself and the church and God because of because of my upbringing, guys. I could not even begin to fathom accepting my queer identity before I came to Waco. I also could not even fathom that the state of my mental health was directly linked to the rhetoric I was constantly surrounded by in regards to my sexuality. I remember going home after my first year of grad school to visit, and I still had friends who were enmeshed in the evangelical community. I remember reaching out to one of these friends as I was in a really depressive episode and I needed some support. This person has always been super kind and loving, but after coming out to her in December, she harbored a lot of feelings towards my sexuality that she never communicated to me until that moment. And the rhetoric I received then was that I'm depressed because of the sin in my life, and that everything I'd been learning recently about the Bible is wrong, and that I must pray the sinner's prayer and walk away from that lifestyle if I want to be free from depression and anxiety. And there's a parallel between the way the church treats those with mental health and the LGBTQ plus community. Both are attributed to having a lack of faith or sin in their life. Now, I was always told that my struggle with depression was because of active sin in my life or a lack of faith. And both narratives are equally destructive, and they can't be untangled from each other. Whether intentional or not, it's a way to instill fear and control among hurting people to make them feel really helpless. It manipulates one into believing that no matter what, you are not good and nothing about you is good. I didn't know I could have a God, deal with my mental health, and step into my queer identity. I was shamed from anything that kept me from being happy. I couldn't figure out why I was so sad all of the time until I realized that I had been denying my entire being for most of my life. Because one institution told me it was wrong. I've experienced the divine while floating in a body of water, making eye contact with my dog and feeling the connection I have with him, and beautiful, loving friendships, and a new church tradition that I was never exposed to growing up. I've experienced something divine as I've sat with grieving family members as their loved ones have taken their final breath. There is something divine in our ability to love, despite how many awful things we've engaged in or experienced. And the only thing different between that experience with my brother and everything I've experienced now is that I no longer need those stained glass windows because I know I'm free. I'm free to be who God made me to be. I'm free to experience the divine everywhere. I'm not limited on sacred spaces. I can experience the divine anywhere in the world with anyone or anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay, for allowing us to hear your story and for that courageous storytelling. Next, Katie Valenzuela. She lives her life by two values, kindness and curiosity. She believes every human being should be treated with their souls acknowledged, and contrary to the popular saying, while it's thought that curiosity killed the cat, she believes curiosity saves her every single day. Professionally, she works in marketing and is working towards her master's in human resources with an emphasis in diversity and technology. Generally, Katie thinks of herself as a bit much, but in the best way. As Lindsay Rush, aka Mary Oliver's drunk cousin on Instagram, says, she is like a bonus French fry in the bottom of the bag, like a champagne shower, like triple texting good news. Please help me welcome Katie.
Growing up, I absolutely hated going shopping for jeans. If you are someone who identifies as a woman, perhaps you're familiar with the sentiment. I wish I could say we're entitled to compensation. But then again, does anyone actually enjoy jean shopping? I mean, they're not always comfortable and they can fit really funny. They are what's considered hard pants. You know, like sweatpants or leggings or soft pants. Soft pants I have no issue with. I'm at home, I'm on the couch, a blanket, a book, a cat in my lap, I am set. But I can't go out in soft pants. I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely do. But I can't wear them to, say, the office or out on a date. The world says that this requires a different set of attire, one where I have to look put together. And honestly, I have often felt like I have to look put together. You see, growing up, I had debilitating self-image issues. I hated every ounce of the way that my body looked. She was too big in some places and not big enough in others. And so my thought process was, if I can be wearing a cute outfit, if I can look put together, surely that will be enough. People will focus on that and not what was going on underneath. Growing up, I didn't see a lot of people on TV or in the movies or in books that looked like me. And so my standard of beauty centered around white women, around whiteness, something that I am not. I didn't look like any of the Disney princesses. I didn't look like a lot of characters. And that made things like Halloween feel really tricky. Finding the right shade of makeup foundation, impossible. And finding a pair of hard pants that fit properly, unlikely. So it is no wonder that I hated the reflection that I saw in the mirror. I did not love, let alone like my body until I was about 26 years old. Funny enough, this is around the time where our prefrontal cortex finishes developing in our brain, that thing that helps us with critical thinking skills and processing. But before that, I did not like or love my body. And it didn't feel like a choice. It felt more like fact or fiction, true or false. My body didn't feel like it was alive. It felt like this thing that was supposed to carry everything. Expectations, resentment, exhaustion, and all of the negative self-talk that I could muster. My body didn't feel alive. So even after I worked through all of my self-image issues, I developed new ways to hate my body. Have you ever had a panic attack? Or maybe you've been in a situation where you're really frustrated and angry and you're trying to stay focused and serious, but then you start crying. Or maybe you have felt your body go into fight, flight, or freeze. Instead of hating the outside of my body, I learned to hate what was going on inside. My emotional makeup, my trauma, my heartbreak, my grief. My body wasn't doing the things that I wanted it to at the times that I wanted it to do it. And I just learned to copy and paste that hate in a different font. Did anyone ever tell you that your body would change as you got older? I mean, past childhood, past puberty, into adulthood. Because I knew the deal when we were kids. You eat your vegetables, you drink your milk, and you grow up big and strong. That's the deal. Cause and effect. And I learned about puberty, but no one told me what happened after that. No one told me that when you're around 30 years old, if you sleep wrong, your neck will hurt for at least a week. No one sat me down and tell me what cellulite was. No one told me that I could be a grown-up and still get acne. No one told me that this world was not designed with me in mind. And so, in fact, a pair of hard pants may never properly fit because they're often mass-produced. And that labels and sizes are things that vary wildly and often don't make sense. And that most stores only carry straight sizes that stop promptly at 3XL because why would we be size inclusive? No one told me that even now I am temporarily able-bodied, and that if we all live long enough, eventually we will all be disabled. And that most of what we have today is thanks to the disability community, a group of people who have fought then and are still having to fight today for accessibility. And they are often seen as other and disregarded, which is a wild concept to me, considering that one day we will all need a ramp, a handrail, a walker, a wheelchair, a hearing aid, or a mask to protect our well-being. No one told me that, in fact, America was founded on a caste system, and so that my mere existence as a woman of color is political. No one told me that existing in predominantly white spaces was work, and that rest takes work and rest is resistance. No one told me that the older I got, the softer my body would become, and that that was okay, but that also meant that one year the clothes in my closet would fit reasonably well, and then by the next they would fit horribly because of weight or stress or existing. No one told me that my body has a memory better than my own, and that I can be completely fine and then hear a voice, a name, a word, be in a situation and instantly not be okay. No one told me that my body is alive, that I am alive. Why is it that it isn't until the end of someone's existence that we begin searching for signs of life? Why aren't we always searching for signs of life? And while life shouldn't have sore necks or panic attacks or hard pants or heartbreak, it does. But it also has crying from laughing and first kisses and celebrations and new books and cats on laps and cute pictures of cows and warm mugs of tea and places like this. I don't know if I'll ever have a pair of hard pants that fit me perfectly. And I can't promise you that I'm ever going to love shopping for jeans. But I've got my soft body and my soft pants and so many signs of life because I am alive. And because of that, I will continue to change. At least, I hope I do. I promise I'm supposed to sit here. I'm not like staging a sit-in situation.
Thank you, Katie, for powerfully and vulnerably sharing your story. I'm not the biggest fan of shopping either, but the next time I do, I will definitely be looking for soft pants. So next up, we do have a panel discussion moderated by our co-founder and producer, Cheryl Leung, and speakers as well.
Well, hello again. You're just the best.
Oh, thanks.
You know that, though. I don't really need to tell you that. Well, you've picked up the theme, hopefully, as I promised, about institutions. And a lot of this event actually, no pressure, but hung on, I don't want to block you. I feel like I'm tall.
You're not blocking me.
Okay, good. I mean, I did try to stage this appropriately. Okay. Hung on the yes from Katie to do this event because I really felt strongly about us talking about bodies today. And it took me a while to really frame that the way I wanted to. And there's more friends coming. Men, wherever you are, you may come out. And what it is that, we talk about institutions and that how these institutions are those things that, whether we want to or not, our lives completely orient around them when we're near them. And even when we try to leave them, they're what initially form us. And all of those institutions, family, marriage, media, government, church, etc., inform how we perceive and understand our bodies as a collective. Healthcare is another institution. And so when you put all of that together, you think, well, no wonder we're a bit confused and have such heavy things to unpack when it comes to bodies. There's some gray chairs back there too, yeah. And you can get on. And Alexandra, did you want to come on? You can come on up too. Yeah, John's got the gray chairs. So today we're just gonna take some time to talk about the many ways that our bodies, and Frederick's coming too from some with land, because we don't talk about bodies. We don't talk about them in the church. We often don't talk about them in our families unless it's in particular context. So your talk is beautiful and it opens up the door for so many wonderful conversations. And I think that I wanted to jump off just from that, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So the first question, and y'all don't need to all answer all these questions, but as you were listening to Katie, when she's talking about shopping, she's talking a lot more than shopping, right? It's that experience of society being set up to communicate that that the world is made for certain people, and that if you fit into that mold, you are good, you are right. If you don't, then something maybe about you isn't so right. And so I wonder what maybe some of your experiences have been in that, whether it's as a teenager growing up or changing, if anyone has something that just really sticks out at you for various reasons. Yeah, Stephanie.
So when I was 6 or 7 years old, my mother remarried. And in the basement of our house were stacks of Playboy and Penthouse magazines. And that showed me what women were supposed to look like to be accepted. And then add sexual abuse on top of it, and there was something really wrong with me. So it set the stage of, even as a white woman with the white heritage that I grew up with, of you need to look and be and act a certain way in order to be accepted in society. And boy, did that mess up my mind.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience as you, where I'm a little tall. So growing up, my family, we didn't have very much money. We used to always go to the thrift store and things like that. And I know my mom felt like she had to keep me in like Tim's, Coogee, whatever was popular. And I know it was stressful because getting something in my size at the thrift store, it's not easy. And so we're already shopping at the thrift store, and not only can we not like afford the nice things that other kids might have, we can't afford to go to the thrift store and find me clothes. So I know that even my being wasn't just stressful for myself, but also for my parents, for the sense of what a child should have, what we could afford, and things like that. And it grew me into a person where I started to gravitate away from major brands, major labels, and things like that, because there was never a production that was fitting me, that was for the taller person. There's the big and tall, but they really mean that and part 100%. You can't get tall, you can't get big. You have to be big and tall. So, I really had to struggle to find my own style, my own idea and sense of identity, because there was no place that was reflecting one-to-one what I felt like on the inside and wanted to display myself as. And I think that I hear a lot of women express that, but I don't know if that ever really comes through, that men have that problem too, that sometimes how we feel on the inside is not easily expressed through our clothes or how we interact with people.
I hadn't thought of this till just now, mentioning shopping. So I have 2 gender nonconforming kids, and I grew up as a white cis het male and fit in nicely. I'm the normiest of norms, as I like to say. So when my kids wanted to shop in different sections of the store than I was used to taking them, it was challenging. And sometimes one kid predominantly wanted to shop in the male section, and another kid would be like, well, let's go over here, and then let's go try over here, right? And it's very gendered and separated. Mm-hmm. And so for a kid that likes lots of different things and isn't confining themselves to one thing, at first it's very uncomfortable, because you're like, well, the store is divided this way, and I don't know if we're supposed to be bouncing around all these places, trying on whatever we want and just finding what we like. And then as that challenged me, in all of the gender stuff that I grew up with, it's very freeing to be like, you know what? Mm-hmm. My kid gets to be who they want and express themselves, and it's fun and it's exciting and interesting. And I'll always be like, protecting them from the folks that are like, oh, you can't wear that. Those are girls' clothes, or those are girls' earrings. And he's like, clothes don't have a gender. And when he was here in Waco, he actually said that to another student who was giving him some problems about what he was wearing. And the other kid said, what's a gender? And I was like, oh, we have so much education to do, right?
I can relate to the shopping experiences a lot. I remember growing up and always, presented as a straight woman when I am not. And I remember having to sneak off to the men's section or the boys section just to look at their t-shirts because I like the way they fit more. And I looking back at pictures and stuff, I can see the way my style has changed, and the more I've become comfortable within my own body and don't feel like I have to meet a certain standard or people will even say you don't dress like you're queer. And I'm like, okay, well, my sexuality has nothing to do with my gender presentation. And that's just something I've struggled with a lot. Even now that I'm 35, it still feels uncomfortable sometimes going to the men's section to get t-shirts that I really like, or even shopping in the women's section because I don't fit a standard norm of what, a woman should dress like.
Have any thoughts? Pass. I can say something. Yeah, I would have to get a microphone for you, but we can do that.
I grew up with 2 older brothers, and I had 2 cousins, and they were boys as well. So back in 90s, we didn't have a lot of cloth, So you just wore what you had. So I wore a lot of jeans and pants from my older brothers. And so I can relate actually a lot because I didn't have a choice. But when I came to the United States, I caught myself on the thing that I bought a lot of dresses for myself. And my husband still struggles with this because I always go to the store and I buy dresses and shoes. So that's it. I think that's my maybe childhood trauma. I don't know, but I'm healing it like this right now.
You got there as soon as you could, right? All the dresses. So as we, it seems like such a simple thing, shopping, and it's just not. And Katie, that was just you scratching the surface in this talk.
Yeah, I barely mentioned I did mention straight sizing.
Yeah.
But.
And we only have some representation of bodies and experiences, and we could just get even further on this. So I want to make sure that that's clear. We aren't talking about, you talk about straight sizing a little bit, about stopping at 3XL, if you're lucky to even find 2 3XL in a store in Waco. We didn't talk about adaptive clothing, although you did speak to what all the disability community has given us. So just to say that you did so much, and yet we have spoken about this so little that I think anytime we even begin to scratch the surface, it's often brand new for so many of us, and there's so many more voices that could be at the table. When you were working on this talk, and I know that you've been thinking about a lot of these things, you also couldn't really have this conversation without also having the conversation about, from your experience being a woman of color within that. Do you want to say anything more specifically about that or open up that? I realize it would be you and Sadiq at this moment, but.
Yeah. I think when I moved to Central Texas is when I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley, which is the point at the bottom of Texas, about 5 minutes from the border of Mexico. So growing up, a lot of people, I look similar to a lot of people in terms of skin color. And so when I moved to Central Texas is when I first experienced racial trauma and blatant microaggressions. In my first college class, I answered a question and a student turned around and said, "How did you know that?" And I said, well, I thought it was like a common sense question, like just something to answer. And he was like, well, I thought all Mexicans were dumb. And that wasn't the last time that something like that would happen, and it still happens today. And I think even now, there's so much that's been ingrained because because of how society works, and because, again, like, I'm living in a predominantly white city, and so I'll be at work and feel the need to have to do something, and everyone should go to therapy. But my therapist the other day was like, well, how many people of color are on your direct team? And I was like, oh, I'm the only one. And she was like, yeah, so you don't need to do that. You need to rest, and you can choose to rest. And it takes work to rest, but you have to rest. And then the work of Trisha, I want to say Hersey, of Rest is Resistance and the NAP ministry and things like that. And yeah, and just how we've been told, most people of color have been told that we have to be excellent. And if we're not excellent, then we're not even showing up to the table. And even as it was mentioned, I'm working on my master's in human resources with an emphasis on diversity. One of the classes I recently had an incredibly racist and ableist course material that said that because I'm a person of color and XYZ, I have handicaps. And so I need to show up to more things. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's the answer. I think institutions need to change, and we need to do the work of like actually dismantling the privilege within them and work through our own privilege of dismantling it on a daily basis.
Explains a lot about our HRs. This is what their professionals are learning in their master's programs.
Yeah.
That's very helpful. Now I understand. And Sadiq, I know that you too I have two mics. What am I doing? Sadiq, I know that you also have, he turned it off for me because he knows, traveled and lived a lot of places before here. And I know that that has an impact on your experience. So if you want to speak to any of those things, please do.
So I grew up in North Philadelphia, born and raised. And we
Sorry.
it felt like it had to happen, right? But no, and my family is a mixture of African American and Arab. And so even though I oftentimes present as African American and like I don't have a problem being like titled as African American, it's not the only culture that like my heritage comes from. And so when it comes to my mom and like my sisters and things like that, they are hijabis. So like when people see them, they know that they're Muslim, whereas when people see me, it's never like even thought of. People don't even think to ask. And that leads me into a lot of different experiences where people, I guess, feel comfortable being honest, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But one standout experience is when I was in college for music, we got assignment, and they were like, choose a figure that affected European music. We were doing music history, so choose a figure that affected European music and like do a report on them. And so my figure was a figure who had bought like the guitar, the violin, all these kinds of things to Europe, and he was a Arab figure. And my teacher did not want to let me do the report, and it was like this huge kind of kerfluffle for nothing. I had to go to the head of the department. I had another teacher who was teaching government, and he's Moroccan. She made me translate all of the sources that I had, some of which were in Arabic. She was like, you have to translate them to English. Like, it just seemed like there was this high like metric of work that I had to do. And so my teacher was like, do you want me to talk to her? But he also works for the FBI. So I was like, no, we're not there yet. We're not at that stage. So like we went about the work of translating the sources and things like that. And I presented a stellar report, but one of the students in class was like, she made sure to make the comment, and I know her personally, so she made sure to make the comment, but she was like, I want to thank you because we would have never gotten exposure to any kind of historical music that happened in Europe, that wasn't by white people, if you hadn't decided to do a figure, that's outside the common, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart kind of thing. And, that's what school is supposed to be about. But when you have the person who's in control, that gets to decide or even ignore how you show up or what the classroom or these people might have in their history, their heritage and things like that, it does less to enrich the space. We could have a space where Jewish people are coming and presenting their music, Muslim people are coming and presenting their music, and we're creating a truly, space that embraces, and that's what music is supposed to be about. And so when we create division, especially in these spaces where we're supposed to be aiming for unity, I think it creates a larger problem. And when we're taking people for just what we see visually and not understanding that they can embody so many experiences and so many different ways of being in this world, and they have things to teach us, we are really restricting ourselves from growing and from learning and being better people, more human, And so that's kind of what I took from that experience, was to remember that your issues are never the worst, your heights are probably never the best. You are in some sense average, and it's okay to be average because other people around you who are beautiful and wonderful and amazing people are also average. They're also trying, they're striving and doing things. And so it made me realize that I was bringing value to that classroom, even if the teacher wasn't recognizing it.
Yeah. And like you said, you brought so much awareness to the people in that class. And I think that is that way also with what I mentioned about the disability community. We have handrails and elevators and talk to text and all these other things, thanks to them. And that it's not only physical disabilities, but also mental disabilities. I have depression and anxiety and PTSD. I know there are people who are neurodivergent. And this is also impacts how we exist in spaces. And it's really frustrating when I think we saw, especially in the pandemic, there was so much ableism around to be well, we have to go back to work. And I'm human beings aren't made to work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. That's not what we're made for.
Who works all 8 hours straight? None of us do, because it's not possible.
Yeah, but it's you have to show up to the office. And there are people who
of course.
physically can't come to the office. And there are people who have debilitating anxiety and depression that can't leave bed right now.
Yeah. And I wanted to, first of all, thank you. And that's the next direction I wanted to go. And we'll close it out with this. And Sadiq, you really that word, helped us transition there quite beautifully in that, and I hope that turns into a spoken word because I could feel the rhythm and it was coming about that beautiful average people and the ability to just be beautiful average people. And I was thinking if we let you go another minute, it was gonna start, we were coming. So what I was really hoping that we could end on is that idea of the invisible things. And so for you, like you said, your sisters are hijabis, there is no hiding their Muslim identity. You can choose when you want to, or just by default, if you don't announce when you walk into a room, nobody knows. And that is true for some with their neurodivergence or their sometimes physical disability, with their mental health, with a lot of different things, either because it's not obvious or because that day it's not as present. And yet, it doesn't mean that it's not affecting them. It doesn't mean that it doesn't affect them in some circumstances. And so I loved, again, everything about your talk, but so much of the way that you framed for us the normalcy of that experience, and that while we have this tendency to want to say we, the majority, are normal, everyone else in this box is the disability community, when the most appropriate label is everyone is temporarily able-bodied. You may be able-bodied, and then you, like last year, when you were here at Belief and Belonging, you could not get anywhere on your own because you had a major foot surgery, and it was months.
Mm-hmm. Which I even had to process through before having that surgery. It was planned, but oh, I'm going to be physically disabled for a little bit, and what does that look like, and how do I cope with that, and how do I process it?
Your mom
in
had
order
to come.
yeah.
And, everything was.
How do I ask
different.
for help?
Yeah. And that was, you've dealt with these mental pieces, but now this is very physical, very outward, and you're going to need some very specific things. And you've recovered and gone through those things. Some people, it's much longer. It's a chronic illness, it's something else. And so our ability to be sensitive to those things makes us able to live in communal spaces with empathy and compassion. Our inability to do that is what breaks communal spaces and what causes people not to belong. And you wonder, where'd so-and-so go? And it's because they could not thrive and nobody could hear that. So like for me, I have physical disability that sometimes is noticeable, sometimes is not. But when I know that there's a space that I can't physically navigate over and over again, and there's no change made, or that things always meet later, and I don't have the energy to go that long, which is true with people who either have chronic illnesses or mental illness. It's very hard. So I wanted to stop talking and let y'all speak to that, because I know that you all have experiences and you can choose whether or not you want to move into that. Generally or specifically?
Yeah, as y'all were sharing, I was really thinking about these different identities that we have, and the identities that are like obvious. They're physical. They're things you see, the hijab, or our skin color, like all of those, and then all of those things that we don't see that are hidden. And growing up as the normiest norm, my physical appearance gets me all the privilege, right? And so most of my life is just like smooth sailing. It's easy, and I didn't think about it, right, until I began learning more about privilege and racism and understanding all of those things. And then when my kids came out, and all of a sudden I had queer kids, now there's an identity as a parent of a queer kid that comes up all the time, and I have to choose whether or not to come out, right, to this person. Never been my experience until I had queer kids, right? And so now when I'm here and so, oh, why did you move to Colorado? And I have to decide, am I gonna say because I have a trans kid, or am I gonna say, oh, I got a job in Denver, right? And I always start with, I got a job in Denver, and then I wait and see, right? So, it's so important, I think, especially for people like me who have so much privilege, to really try to imagine, if you want to go adopt queer kids, please do, because they need safe, good families to be in. But maybe you just have all this privilege and don't know what to do with it. The work of trying to imagine what it's like to have identities that you can't hide, and to have identities that you hide because it feels unsafe to be out to people. It's hard work, but I'm so much better for, even though I don't like having to have that feeling of whether or not it's a safe place to share this part of myself or this part of my identity. So, yeah.
You gave me such a good lead-in, because I wanted to talk about safety. And there's, generation after generation after generation has not been able to talk about their trauma. And so we create inclusive environments in order to create safety for ourselves. And I was raised in, if someone looked different or talked different in multiple forms, whether it was a physical disability or something else, they were othered. And people are othered because of our own fear, because we don't feel safe. And it's really an opportunity to look at what in me is coming up so that I can heal some of the crap and the messages that I was raised with some of which that has come through epigenetically, and to really look at what in me can I shift, because we're all children of the universe. We're all made of the same stuff. And I think, really looking at getting curious. Like, doesn't curiosity feel a lot better than fear and othering people? So it's been a big lesson for me because, as you said, I grew up with a lot of privilege, and there's still a lot that's available to and for me. And yet, I'm finding I like curiosity a lot better than fear, and being able to have conversations with people and like, what makes you tick? What are you interested in? What brings you joy? And that's a much funner world to live in.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
I think like between the two of y'all said a lot, like with imagination and being like a child of the universe, I think we forget. There's a song that I heard and it goes, I'm an old woman named after my mother, and my old man's another child that's grown old. And I think it's really beautiful. It goes on to say, if dreams were lightning and thunder were desire, then this whole house would have burnt down a long time ago. I think it's beautiful because we're all just kids who got older, and that didn't come with a rule book or like we get to a certain age and we just know it all. And like, if we don't honor that child with imagination, new ways to play and be youthful, we lose a huge part of our lives to like, to things that we end up regretting, just not being as free as children are.
To come all the way back to the body, think about when you were a kid and how in touch you were with your body when you didn't know better and you were just like, I don't feel good, or I have to go to the bathroom, or like whatever. Like, we're so in touch. We were born in touch with our bodies, and then we just learn over time, like, oh, I gotta like get fit. I gotta look this way. I gotta, do whatever.
Behave this way in this space, not be myself. I have to like do something different.
Sit still, listen, don't move. All of those things we learned growing up, and getting back in touch with that. I love that because that's that work of getting back to being embodied people. Yeah, and it's I imagine like being more embodied means you can imagine more too. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go play in the dirt now.
I'm gonna join you.
Well, as we close out this time, because this could go wonderfully for a long time, I just want you to remember that these people met for the first time yesterday. They just sound like they have been old friends for a long time and are from different states, different backgrounds, different ages, but have really spent time as they've been working on their talks and having a little bit of interaction over Zoom and Facebook, and I say like twice, really digging in and doing their own inner work around this. And so I'm so grateful that they've chosen to do that individually and then come together and have this conversation. And with Katie's leading, there's also a table in the back with some of their own individual things that they've worked on. Some of them are future authors over here or current authors in this table back here. And we will have some time at the end for you to mingle and have some conversation with them too. So I just want to leave that out. But if you don't mind giving them a round of applause as we continue on.
I don't know about y'all, but I enjoy just being a part of listening on that conversation, the authenticity, the genuineness. I feel like, at least for me, I don't hear that every day. So I enjoyed that. Next up, we do have Timothy Palmer. I did want to give a content warning with his talk. It is a discussion of suicidal ideation, attempts, and treatment. And so, as before, wanting to give space if you wanted to leave the room or take care of yourself, all those things, wanting to give time as I read his bio and his introduction. Timothy Palmer is an educator, songwriter, and speaker who lives in Abilene, Texas, with his wife and 3 kids. And when Timothy isn't in the classroom teaching, he spends his time educating and advocating for mental health awareness. Timothy is a genuine and authentic speaker who ties together his experience as someone who lives with a mental health disorder, as well as his knowledge of the stigmas and misunderstandings attached to mental illness to inform, educate, and empower. Whether he is speaking at a conference or in a classroom of teenagers, Timothy provides an engaging and dynamic atmosphere that reaches people at every level of learning. Please help me welcome Timothy.
It's been a good day. The poet William Winthy reminds us that we put on our stories before our clothes every morning. And you've learned a lot today as our speakers have, with great vulnerability, exposed those stories to you and to us. But how do you put on a story when you're still not quite sure how to tell it? For most of my life, I've wanted to die. When I was young, I would lay out on the driveway and look up at this vast expanse of stars, and I would imagine my eventual funeral. Usually it came with a newspaper headline that said, young artist, young rock star, young martyr, Timothy Palmer, dead at a young age, potential not fully realized, the world should mourn, right? And I would think about the women that would gather around my coffin and weep at this unmet potential that I had. But as I grew up, those fantastical ideas about what death would look like for me began to take a darker turn and shift into darker visions. I would find myself at the train tracks with my car and visualizing myself walking on the track as the train came toward me. Also, while I was in the car, sometimes I would have to fight the urge to swerve into oncoming traffic. Suicidal ideation has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. And even though I was diagnosed with clinical depression in 8th grade and was on medication and had therapy and things like that, these thoughts never really went away. But I didn't develop a plan for how I would end my life until I was 38 years old. And at the invitation of my community of support, as well as my doctor and my family, I was, for the first time in my life, taken to a psychiatric facility and hospitalized because my depression had gotten so bad that I couldn't do anything and I couldn't see any light in my life. For the first 24 hours or so of that hospitalization, I didn't do anything except for sleep. My body, as we heard from Katie, was letting me know that it was tired. And so I just slept. But the first night that I went to dinner, I was walking in line and there were some newbies like me, but there were also some OGs that had been in the different systems and hospitals that were with us. And one of them I call Fur Hat and Fedora Guy because that's how he showed up to the facility, in a fur coat and a fedora. Well, he, when we were in line, invited me to come and sit with him and some of the other OGs, and I declined, not only because I felt like I was better than him, I'm embarrassed to say, but also because I was just so tired of interacting with other human beings. I just felt like I needed my own space. So I went through the line and I got my meat and gravy on my tray, and I got a fork, and I sat down with my tray at a table by myself, and I began to try to figure out how I would eat the meal in front of me because it needed a knife, but I was in a psychiatric facility for suicidal ideation, and for whatever reason, they didn't want to give us knives, all right? And so I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to figure out how to eat this meat, and I hear, psst, hey. And I look over, and it's fur hat and fedora guy, and he's saying, turn it around. And I'm confused because I don't know what he's talking about, and I'm still trying to eat my meal, and he says, yo, turn it around. And he holds his fork up and holds the tines of his fork with the handle of it face down. He was inviting me to see this world and these tools with a new perspective. And every meal from then on, I got one fork and one knife fork to eat my meals. I was in there for about 12 to 13 days, and I can remember the next day we were going to dinner, and I realized that there was a vending machine on the way to dinner. And I'm a candy junkie. I love it. And I especially love Reese's peanut butter cups. And in this vending machine were Reese's peanut butter cups. And I thought to myself, what a cruel jest, right? You put us in here, we're dealing with the most difficult things in life, and here you're gonna put Reese's peanut butter cups and we're not allowed to have money? What is happening here? And I was complaining to some of my friends that I had begun to sit with at dinner, and I told them this, and they were like, you can have money, bro. And I was like, this is my first time. I don't know what I'm doing, all right? And so I called my wife that night and I said, hey, is there any way that you can get me some money, put it on my books? I don't know how they do it, but can you figure out a way to get me some money so that I can get these Reese's peanut butter cups? My life had gone down the toilet. I was not feeling good, but I knew that Reese's peanut butter cups were this crack of light in the darkness that I was experiencing. And so with the help of a friend, I showed up to my room one day, and there was a brown paper bag, and I opened it up, and there were 16 crisp $1 bills. So I shoved it in my pocket. I begin to walk to dinner that night, and I veer off from the line of people that are going in to eat in the cafeteria, and I put $1 in, I put $2 in, I push A5 or B4 or whatever it was, and the little spinny thing starts to spin, and the Reese's peanut butter cups begin to move toward me, and there was this light, and angels began to sing, and it was this amazing, and as it began to fall, that little thing caught it, and it didn't get stuck. It fell down into the deal. I put my hand in there. I held onto it. And after dinner that night, I went back to my room. And I want to remind you that I was still chronically suicidal at this point in my journey. And I sat on my bed and I looked at those Reese's peanut butter cups. And as I did, I recalled how the friend that brought me the money had been there for me for years. I began to recall that I had just gotten off the phone with a wife who spent the time to figure out a way for me to get these Reese's peanut butter cups. And I opened them and I ate them so slowly because every bite was a communion, a connection to a community of people that knew me and knew what I needed at that time. But I still, for whatever reason, was just not able to figure out how to want to live. And so a couple of days later, I'm sitting on that same bed, and I can think of a million reasons why my death would not be a good thing for my family, for my students, for people in the community. But there was nothing that I could think of that just made me want to live, something for me. And so I remembered a conversation that I'd had with my wife a few days earlier. She called to inform me that our youngest son had a new dream, and that he wanted to get his hair cut into a mullet. Y'all know the party in the back, like business in the front, party in the back, like the neck warmer thing, or what did they say, the Mississippi mud flap? I can't remember what all it is, but he wanted to get his hair cut into a mullet, and something clicked for me. And I said to myself that I want to live because I want to see my son's mullet. And even if I don't live a day past that, I am going to live to see his mullet. And thankfully, after 10 or 12 days in the hospital, my family came to pick me up, and I saw that beautiful mullet. But that hospitalization wasn't the end of my journey. After that, I still made another plan to end my life. I still went to the hospital 3 times, so 4 times in as many months. I had 25 sessions of electroconvulsive therapy. I had a number of medication changes and a handful of new diagnoses. And those coalesced to create the most difficult year that we've ever experienced. And even now, I have to eat properly in order to be mentally healthy. I have to sleep. There's no more staying up until 2 a.m. on creative projects. I have to go to bed by 10 o'clock, and I can't wake up too early. My sleep routine has to be in check for me to be mentally healthy. I can't do as much as I used to be able to do. My bandwidth has shrunk to a proportion that I never thought it would. My grandiose, delusions of grandeur about becoming a rock star or a martyr or whatever it was, having my face on Rolling Stone, those don't exist anymore because my world has had to become so small. And still, there are days when I don't want to live. And in those moments, I start working through my safety plan. It's kind of a turn it around discipline that reminds me to look at my life from a different perspective. And in those moments, I remember that Reese's peanut butter cups can be transfigured into communion cups, connecting me with a community of people that love me and that I love. And in those moments, I think about how my wife laughs on the inside when I tell her a joke. I remember that my daughter sings Taylor Swift songs while she's doing the dishes. I recall the number of conversations that my son and I have in the car on the way to school in the morning. And of course, I visualize the beautiful, luscious locks of hair that trail my youngest son when he rounds first base. And in those moments, if even for just a moment, I want to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy, for that beautiful, powerful, and vulnerable story. Next, we're going to have Austin Lemons back with Sadiq Granger, and they will be having a small performance for us. So please help me welcome Sadiq and Austin.
Thank you for sharing the stage with me, Sadiq. I really enjoyed that. One more time for Sadiq. Yeah, that was great. Last piece I'm going to play for you today is called Searching, and it's by a composer named Dr. Kendall K. Williams.
Lastly, we have Lucas Land. Lucas Land always tries to do the right thing, but alas, he's only human. Currently, he is Director of Development for the Dolores Project in Denver, Colorado, where he lives with his partner, 3 kids, dog, and cat. He has degrees in music and theology, which he doesn't regret even though he doesn't use them in his day job. Lucas has lived and worked internationally. He has also advocated and volunteered in the areas of sustainability, racism, diversity, and LGBTQ+ rights. Raising good humans is the accomplishment he is most proud of. Lucas enjoys writing and playing music, tabletop games, hiking, camping, and seeing Brandy Carlisle perform at Red Rocks. Please help me welcome Lucas Land.
I did see Brandy Carlisle at Red Rocks recently. It was incredible. Highly recommend. What a journey we've been on today together, and such incredible stories. This is mine. I've always had an anti-authority streak. I grew up in a small town in Texas, and I went to high school in the 90s, and I gave my teachers hell. I listened to alternative music, I grew my hair out and painted my fingernails. But I also really wanted to belong, to be part of something bigger than myself. And one of the things I found that was bigger than me was the church. And I was all in. I was in a Christian band. In college, I decided I needed to get rebaptized to make sure that my faith was my own, that I had made my own decision. I was all in. And one of the threads running through both of these truths about me is that I'm an idealist. I don't just believe the world could be better, I believe the world should be better. There's cracks in institutions that are so obvious, but I believed that if we tried a little harder, we could embody the goodness and kindness and radical values of Jesus. These unrealistic expectations of myself and the church and the world around me couldn't really last. There were cracks that showed up all along the way. But as Leonard Cohen said, those cracks are how the light gets in. When I was still a young, eager, probably judgmental evangelical, I was an exchange student in Denmark for a year. And my host mother took us to this beautiful island one time, and as we were walking, I commented that Danes don't really go to church the way we do in the US. And she turned to me and said, "Don't assume that we don't have faith just because it doesn't look like yours." The cracks in my worldview were starting to grow. After college, I worked in a couple of different churches, both of which were somewhat traumatic experiences. And the experience that continues to haunt me was when my best friend from college, best man at my wedding, was dying of cancer at 24 years old. I was working in the church office, and his parents called me and said he wasn't doing very well and that I should come see him before he passed away. So I jumped in the car immediately and headed to San Antonio. And on the way, I got a call from my pastor saying I really needed to be at this church council meeting that night and that it wouldn't look good if I didn't show up. I was wrecked by being put in that position. But I'll always be grateful that I chose the sacredness of that moment over a church council meeting. When I left that church, I could have done anything else. I remember thinking, I could walk away. I could do something different. And yet I decided to go to seminary.
what can I say? I love theology, I really do, so it does make sense. And during that time in seminary, we went to this small Baptist church where one of my closest friends in seminary was the pastor. Her last year of seminary, she invited me to lunch and said she had something to tell me. And as she sat nervously across the table from me, she said, "Don't worry, Lucas, I'm not gay." And then proceeded to come out to me as transgender. Our seminary affirmed women in ministry, at least in theory, but it was nowhere near affirming LGBTQ people. And so her coming out to me was such a huge gift and something I'll always be grateful for in the midst of a place where those cracks were often so prominent. During our time in seminary, we also fell in love with this weird community outside of Waco called World Hunger Relief. And we decided to sell our house, pack up our 2 small children, and move to this commune of Christian hippies living in community and learning sustainable agriculture. I mean, talk about a group of idealists. This was perfect for me. And while living at the farm, we also started attending this intentional Christian community. More idealists, just bring them on. And we really felt like in that community, we were able to live out our values and our faith with the people around us. We were a diverse community. It was bilingual. And of course, there were conflicts, but we learned about nonviolent communication and conflict resolution, and the relationships grew deeper because of that work. I thought we would be part of that community for the rest of our lives. And then in the summer of 2020, my middle child came out to us as transgender. We didn't hesitate to encourage him to share this news with the church over Zoom, of course. This was 2020, after all. And some of you may be aware over the last several years, it hasn't been a particularly great time to be transgender or the parent of a transgender kid, especially in Texas. A little over a year after coming out to us and the church, a member of the community asked to have a conversation with me about our family and about having a transgender kid. I nervously and anxiously approached their porch, and we sat socially distanced, of course. And that conversation didn't go the way that so many other conversations had gone in that community. There wasn't the same willingness to set aside personal agendas and opinions to try and understand the other. There wasn't a recognition that we didn't have the same stakes in this conversation. And I left feeling uneasy and unsettled. The distance that we kept on the porch for our safety was a sign of the distance that was growing between our family and our community. And we made the painful decision to leave. We had to let go. And the dream of a community where we could be and do better died for us. After losing that community, and while still waiting and wondering if or when CPS might show up at our door, we were desperate for safety and security, a place that would affirm and welcome us just as we are. We visited this very building where I'm standing now, knowing that University Baptist Church in Waco, Texas, had made the decision to be fully welcoming and affirming to LGBTQ people. I remember the first Sunday, the youth pastor introduced himself with his pronouns and asked what our pronouns were. He mentioned they were creating a gender-neutral bathroom so that everybody could feel more safe and welcome. This was a place that had prepared for families like mine. And we felt like we could belong and breathe a little easier. And then, in the fall of 2022, bills began to be filed in the next Texas legislative session, and when I saw them, I thought, oh, fuck. This is not going to get better. And we made the painful decision again to figure out how to leave the only state that had ever been our home, the state where our families were, and the state where our community that we had built over 14 years was. I've always dreamed of a better world that's on its way, and that I could be a part of it if I just found the right community, the right church, the right job, the next thing. And when we moved to Bolivia in 2018, I remember thinking, as I had with every major transition in my life, that this was the opportunity for me to reinvent myself to be the person that I always wanted to be. Does it sound familiar to anyone else? And I realized one day that the problem with that was that I had brought myself with me. You know what they say, wherever you go, there you are. I think that I can share these painful stories and memories because along the way, I learned that leaning into the pain and learning from it was the only way to grow and to move past it. I'm continuing to do that work because life continues to bring pain through the cracks in institutions and individuals. But I know that Leonard Cohen was right, that those cracks are how the light gets in, because I also learned that joy is resistance to the darkness and the pain that haunts us. You see, in the midst of the stress and anxiety of parenting a transgender kid in Texas, I also saw the tears of joy in my kid's eyes when he learned he would be starting testosterone. And we celebrated with our queer chosen family at Waco Pride events. And that joy is what got us through. But the only time that we have to experience and lean into that joy is this present moment. Because the other thing that I learned is that the future is not real. My idealism always leaves me waiting, scanning the horizon for something better to come. The future is an act of the imagination. What an incredible act. It's great to imagine a better world, but it's not a great place for us to put our hope. Because the only way and the only time that we have to embody the better world we want is this present fleeting moment. The only way that that better world will ever arrive is if we live it out in the only moment that we have, right now. I still have a healthy skepticism of authority, but I realize that a life that's just anti is not a full life. The cracks will continue to appear along the way. But if we're willing to look at the light that they let in, we can see ourselves more clearly for who we are. And we can see the divine in ourselves and in others. My hope is that seeing by those cracks and the light they let in, we can live moment by moment as if the world that we want is already here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucas. And with that, that is the end of Belief in Belonging Festival. But first, we have closing remarks from Cheryl. And as she makes her way up, can we just give her another round of applause for all of our speakers and artists over here? And as Cheryl mentioned in the beginning, there will be time to kind of break out and speak to the speakers. So I'll let Cheryl kind of speak more into that.
First of all, we haven't had a chance to do this. Can we thank Andre for the amazing job he's done today? He's been a busy guy, had a lot to read, but thank you for moving the show along with such grace and holding the space for us. I really appreciate it. Well, I don't know how you feel, but my heart is very full. Thank you for being here and with us and holding space for these incredible humans to share their hearts with you and their stories with you. There are a few people that I would like to thank. And as these things go, you never want to forget those people. So, Morty is such a dear friend, and he's been running around without distraction, taking our photography here today. So thank you for being here with us. Also, John, who you've not really seen, and I don't know where he is, but has put together all this technology for our friends all across the country and even the world to be able to be here with us on live stream. So thank you, John, for all you've done to make this possible, as well as Ryan, who is up there working on sound, Roth here on this camera. For Jess, will you peek your head out? Hi, Jess. Jess is a grad student at Baylor, and she's been working as a stage manager back here with us today. Great job. Thank you. Also want to thank Better Together, the group that she's a graduate advisor for, who's volunteered to help make things run as we've been working since earlier this morning, just getting the things that have to happen, and they've been fantastic. And they've only been able to do that because of my other dear friend who I can count on no matter what, and that's Craig Nash. Thank you. And finally, my missing other half, Dr. Kristen Donnelly. I wish you were here. This would be much more rousing. There would be baseball jerseys involved for our struggling teams. But for you and the rest of your team, Aaron and Eleanor, thank you for all you've done to make the StreamYard work, to get these digital programs together, and a million other things. And as I said, all of you. So we will say goodbye to our virtual audience here today. Thank you for being with us.